Andor Season 1 is over. I've already talked about all 12 episodes individually, but now let's talk about how the season worked as a whole. The short answer is, it worked great. I loved it. I have some criticisms and I'll get to those, but I am over the moon with how much I enjoyed Andor, which is a relief because I've been telling people not to underestimate the series for months. It would have been embarrassing if it sucked. I'll admit that watching the first 3 episodes was an adjustment for me. The first and second episodes just kind of end, and then the third finally had that explosion of action. The story always kept me engaged, but I was hesitant about how it started. It was slow and methodical, which I don't mind at all. It just wasn't what I was expecting from a Star Wars story. It felt more like an HBO drama than a remake of Flash Gordon, where Cassian would be constantly moving from danger to danger. But moving into the Aldhani arc, I got used to it. Things just clicked, and I hit a point where every new episode became my new favorite of the series, and that's not just because the latest episode was that much better, it's because of all the groundwork established in the previous episodes. I do think episode 12 is my favorite of the bunch, but that's because it brilliantly brought so many themes and character moments full circle in a satisfying climax. So it seems unfair to say episodes 12 or 10 were the best singular episodes. They certainly got the biggest reactions out of me, but the whole season had to work together for that to happen. The writing on this series was next level. Prior to the series' release, lots of people were asking about why we needed a story about a character when we knew he was going to die. It's weird, I never hear those people complaining when Darth Vader shows up again. Why do we need that? We know he's gonna die in Return of the Jedi. I like Darth Vader stories as much as the next fan. I'm just trying to say it's a silly argument. Star Wars has been diving into the backstories of dead characters since it began. I admit that I personally had kind of a confused reaction when the series was announced years ago. I also had a confused reaction to the announcement of the Dr. Aphra comic, for example, and the Bad Batch series. Fans, including myself, will often just hear character names and then go, really? Them? Without thinking of how those characters can be used to enrich the Star Wars universe and explore deep, real-world themes. I wound up loving using Cassian Andor to show how someone can go from rebellious to complacent to rebellious again. I thought it was awesome seeing him have to really spend time in these different situations with different characters. Luthen, Nimik, Skeen, Kino, Melshi, and Marva all had something to teach him. I thought watching him asking B2, Bix, and Brasso all to lie for him and help him escape in Ferrix the first 3 episodes was perfectly mirrored by having him help them escape in the finale. At the start of the season, I was kind of frustrated that Cassian was a very passive character. Things happened to him more than he would simply decide to do something. But I knew we were building to a place where he would be told not to go to Scarif, and then he would make that choice to go anyway. So I was thrilled to see him taking more and more action over the course of the story, and of course, Diego Luna knocked the role out of the park. Genevieve Riley was also amazing. I still love her story of being cast for Revenge of the Sith and then removed from the final cut, but then she comes back for a small part in Rogue One, and now she's got a major role in a series. Shout out to Christine King, the casting director for Episode 3. She saw talent 17 years ago, and it's finally paying off for Star Wars fans now. Honestly, some of my favorite stuff in the show was the political subterfuge Mothma had to deal with. Imperial spies watching her every move, smiling and saying one thing but meaning another. That one scene with Tay Kolma where she kept telling him to smile as she dropped bombshell after bombshell on him. Excellent. Stellan Skarsgård was also amazing. I loved that we got to peel back more and more layers to Luthen in every episode. He's a character that definitely frustrates me, but he is amazing to watch and explore. I think it's great that he serves as a foil to the kind of leader we know Mothma will eventually be, playing a game of chess with people's lives. He's fighting a good fight, but he lost his soul and he knows it. I love that he's a badass, but I never felt like the show glorified him. I see him as tragic. The kind of rebel that I know exists in the real world, someone that may be necessary for victory, but not someone to idolize. I continue to see Luthen as the kind of rebel leader that unfortunately has to exist in the real world, and Mon Mothma is building to become the ideal rebel leader that the real world should aspire to. Kyle Soller as Cyril Karn brought some dark humor and insight into the kind of person who wants to be part of the Empire. Denise Goff was a standout as Dedra Miro, personalizing the evil of the Empire. The fact that I was rooting for her in earlier episodes when I knew that was wrong, and then to have that confirmed to be wrong once she arrived to Ferrix was fantastic. Adria Arjona, Fiona Shaw, I genuinely think every character was perfectly cast, from the main cast down to the side characters like Brasso, Wilman Pack, and Clem Andor, and even down to bit parts like the fiendish prisoner intake officer. Nina Gold and Martin Ware were the casting directors, and they deserve constant praise. Every character was so good that one of my criticisms of the series is that I simply wish we got more time with just about all of them. The writing of Andor is incredibly efficient, maybe too efficient at times. It often tells you what you need to know and nothing more. Clem is only in a handful of flashbacks. I saw him enough that I was very upset about his death, and I was moved when Cassian visited his funerary stone. I wish I had more time with him. I brought up Wilman Pack because I liked him and his father Salmon from the second we met them. Again, they're not in a ton of scenes, and then Wilman wound up being pivotal in the finale. Mohanad Bayer's performance was so good that I knew and felt everything I needed to, but it made me wish I had more time with him too. Mon Mothma is the character I hope we spend far more time with in the future. She was described as a co-lead of the series, and I naturally think she will become more and more prominent. I just liked her scene so much that when an episode would go by without checking in on her story, I would be bummed about it. But honestly, this is a far better complaint to have than this character or that character was around too much. Leaving us wanting more is preferable to making us wish something was over. I guess I should talk about the characters that didn't appear in Andor, like Palpatine or Bail Organa or Sly Moore of all people. Do I think there should have been more familiar faces? No, I'm happy with what we got. I was disappointed we missed out on the Sly Moore dinner party, but I also think we're gonna get more and more cameos or whatever you want to call it in Season 2. I just don't see how you tell the story of the rebellion without Bail Organa showing up. Palpatine making his presence known in the Senate would raise the stakes for Mothma significantly. But I was happy to get an appearance from Wolf Yularen and Melshi and Saw Gerrera. I like that the quote-unquote Easter eggs or cameos all made complete sense to this story. And I like that the story was kept very focused on all the new characters and remained very personal in its scope. The Star Wars movies are less subtle, and that's not a dig at them or anything. I'm just saying they deal with archetypes and big, easy-to-grasp ideas. We are introduced to the Empire at a larger scale. They weaponize fear, and the ultimate illustration of that is the ability to destroy entire planets at will. That is evil on a mythological scale, and it requires mythological heroes to fight it and win the day. Andor is more focused on what the Empire looks like on a personal level, how the people that make the Empire tick affect the people it seeks to control. I love that we have galactic threats in Star Wars, but I'm also so glad that every story doesn't have to be that. In my opinion, both the old Legends books and the sequel trilogy suffered from power creep. They kept going back to the well of super weapons and planet killers. I'm not saying it's wrong to do that, but it was never my favorite thing. I got tired of it in Legends, and Starkiller Base is my least favorite thing in The Force Awakens. To me, it can be just as impactful, if not more, to see Kino Loy screaming one way out as he leads his fellow prisoners to freedom, or to watch Marva deliver a stirring speech to her community, causing them to stand up in defiance. And neither of those events end in victory. Not everyone escapes Narkina 5, and Ferrix finds a balance between uplifting and tragic. But it's not about winning, it's about telling the Empire we're not gonna just sit back and accept your oppression. And I love that we explored that oppression on multiple levels. The Empire isn't even in the first 3 episodes. It's a corporation, which can very much be a tool of oppression. Then we get the Imperial Army and a few TIE fighters involved with Aldhani, and then the ISB kicks into high gear and we're getting stormtroopers on Ferrix and a crackdown on crime, and then basically riot police in the finale. Yes, the Death Star is technically in this series. It's a looming threat that we know is coming, but I love that it's not the focus. The focus is on all the real-world ideas and beliefs and philosophies and the kinds of people that lead to something like the Death Star. Everything feels real, and that's enhanced by the production design. Yes, they did use LED technology similar to the volume, and yes, obviously every real element in the series was enhanced by visual effects, but the entire team worked well together to create a world that felt real. Again, I'm not bashing the volume at all. I think it's amazing technology and it works amazingly well for The Mandalorian because the story is crafted with the volume in mind. Andor was not, so I think it was a wise choice to use so many practical elements. The set design throughout the series was simply amazing. I could get lost searching the background of Ferrix or Morlana or Coruscant. But that's a decent segue into my primary criticism of the show, and it's one shared by several fans, I think. Andor's realism means that it is simply less pulpy and weird. A lot of people expressed that thought by asking, why aren't there many aliens in this series? I would argue that there are a decent amount of aliens, they're just rarely front and center. But I do think Andor may have leaned too far away from the weirdness of Star Wars. And I like when Star Wars takes big swings. They don't always land for me. I had a negative reaction to Bor Gullet the first time I saw Rogue One, but I appreciate the risk taken. When Dr. Quadpaw showed up, or Freedy and Dewey on Narkina 5, or Vetch, or of course B2 Emo on Ferrix, they provided levity in a very serious story. But I will say that, overall, I think the creators nailed the balance between darkness and hope. Andor got dark at times. The prison arc was oppressive and sad and borderline hopeless in a franchise that is strongly centered around hope, but I never felt like there wasn't light at the end of the tunnel. I did always feel that hope, even if it was small, and putting the characters through hell made their eventual rise feel that much better. I think the other main criticism I saw online and in comments was that Andor was too slow. I personally disagree with that sentiment, but I do understand it, and I certainly don't hold it against anyone who felt that way. I think it's very much in line with the lack of pulp I've been talking about. Star Wars was based on Flash Gordon and other serials that were fast-paced and each ended with an insane cliffhanger. Like I said, Andor was an adjustment for me, but I got used to it. People love Star Wars for so many reasons that if some fans weren't able to connect with the slower pacing, I think that's totally fair. Because as much as I love Andor, I do not like seeing people putting it on a pedestal like this is the only thing Star Wars should be from now on, and if you don't like Andor, then you just don't get Star Wars. No, Andor is now another option for all Star Wars fans, but it is not the end-all be-all of Star Wars. No story should be. I loved engaging with this series week after week. I'm sad it's probably going to be 2 years before we get the second half of the story, but in the meantime, I'm psyched to return to the wild and fun storytelling of The Mandalorian. I'm excited to have the Bad Batch back. Star Wars cannot and should not be pigeonholed into one style. Andor is a great example of trying something new that I think worked brilliantly as a way to expand the universe and the kinds of stories that can be told there. The lesson of Andor is not to only make Andor now, it's to keep making Andor, but also keep trying new things. But that's all I have to say about Andor Season 1. I started writing some thoughts about the structure of the series, but I realized it was more about Season 2, so I'll be sharing that in another video coming soon. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for all our Andor coverage, follow us on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and consider checking out our Patreon page for our video reactions and audio commentaries for every new episode. And you can check out this playlist for all of our existing Andor content. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.